I have lived a long time, 83 years. I have made bread every morning since I was 9 years old. I have buried a husband. I have raised 7 children. I have carried water from a well in January cold so bitter it cracked the skin on my hands before I could reach the door. I have kept a clean house. I have kept my word. I have sat with the dying and I have washed the dead. That is what I am. That is what I have always been. But there's one thing I have never said out loud, not to a priest, not to a doctor, not to my children, not to anyone who ever sat across a table from me and called themselves my friend. I kept it for 70 years. 70 years is a long time to carry something. Most things get lighter with distance. This one never did. I'm going to say it now because I'm old enough that saying it cannot hurt me and cannot hurt the ones who are still living. Most of them are gone anyway. Most of them took what they knew to the ground with them, and I will do the same, except for this one thing. This one thing I will not take. I do not tell you this for comfort. I do not tell you this because I want you to forgive me. I am past the age of needing forgiveness. I tell you because there are things you are carrying too. I know it, and I do not want you to wait as long as I did to put them down. I was born in October of 1842, southwestern Ohio, near a town called Xenia in Greene County, in a farmhouse that my grandfather built with his own hands from yellow poplar wood. He built it in 1811. By the time I arrived, it was already 30 years old, and the floorboards in the kitchen had a dip in them where 3 generations of women had stood to work. I used to press my heel into that dip when I was small, that soft bowl in the wood. It comforted me for reasons I could not explain. My father's name was Obadiah Birch. He was a quiet man, not cold, just contained. He raised wheat and corn on 60 acres, and in good years he cleared $40 from the whole harvest. In bad years, which came often, there was less. He never complained. He never celebrated either. He received both fortune and hardship in exactly the same way, which was with a slow nod and then a return to work. My mother's name was Clara. She had red hair when she was young. By the time I knew her well, it had gone to rust and then to gray, but you could still see it in the right light. She made soap every autumn in a black iron pot in the yard. The smell of lye and tallow is something I have never forgotten. Some people find it unpleasant. To me it meant that winter was coming, and we were prepared for it. There were 5 of us children. I was the second. Above me was my brother William, who was born in 1840 and died of typhoid in 1857. Below me was my sister Ruth, born in 1844. Then James, born in 1847. Then the youngest, Thomas, born in 1851, who came out small and stayed small, and who was everyone's particular favorite whether we admitted it or not. We were not poor in the way that means hungry. We were poor in the way that means you do not buy a thing unless you cannot make it or go without it. I wore the same pair of shoes from October to April every winter until I was 13, and they were let out twice to keep pace with my feet. I never thought much of it. Everyone I knew lived that way. The farm was 8 miles from town. 8 miles was not a short distance in those years. We went to town maybe 6 times a year, sometimes less. The world we knew was the 60 acres, and the neighbors within 2 miles and the church 4 miles south, where we went on Sundays when the road was passable. That was the whole world, and inside that world my life was clear and ordered, and I knew exactly who I was and what was expected of me. That is the thing about growing up with so little room. You either become yourself very quickly, or you become nothing at all. I became myself very quickly. I was not an easy child. My mother said I was born with my jaw set. What she meant was that I had opinions from the beginning and I did not keep them to myself easily. I knew what was right. I knew what was right. I knew what work needed doing and I knew who was not doing it. I was the kind of child who noticed things and said so, which made me useful and made me difficult in equal measure. I say this not to make myself seem strong. I say it because it is the root of what I am going to tell you. The jaw that was set from birth, that certainty, that absolute sureness that I could see a thing clearly and judge it correctly. That certainty was the thing that ruined me. The summer I turned 16, which was the summer of 1858, a family came to settle on the land adjacent to ours. The father was named Harold Greer. He had come from Pennsylvania with a wife named Edna and 3 children. The oldest was a boy named Caleb, who was about William's age. The middle child was a girl named Harriet, who was 1 year younger than me, and the youngest was another boy, Edmund, who was perhaps 8 years old. I did not take to Harriet immediately. That is not quite right. I noticed her immediately. You could not notice Harriet Greer. She was the kind of person who came into a room and filled it without trying to, without seeming to know that she was doing it. She laughed easily. Not at anything in particular, just at the quality of being alive, it seemed to me. She talked to people she had just met as though she had known them for 20 years. She would touch your arm when she was speaking to you. She would ask you questions and then actually listen to the answers. I found her exhausting. I was not a person who touched people's arms. I was not a person who laughed at nothing. I arrived places on time. I said what I meant. I did what I said I would do. And I went home. I did not think that made me cold. I thought it made me reliable, which seemed to me a better thing to be than charming. Harriet came to church with her family that first Sunday, and by the end of the service she knew the names of every woman in the congregation and had promised to bring a pie to someone's house on Tuesday. I've been going to that church for 16 years, and I still addressed most of the older women as ma'am, because I had never found the occasion to learn their names directly. I told myself it did not matter. I told myself warmth of that kind was just another word for being careless with yourself, for giving pieces of yourself away to people who had not earned them. We became neighbors. Neighbors in those years meant something different than it does now. You could not avoid a neighbor. You needed them for corn husking and for barn raising and for the 10,000 small emergencies that come with farming. And so you were thrown together constantly, whether you wished to be or not. Harriet always wished to be. I did not always wish to be. That was the first difference between us. The second difference was harder for me to accept. Harriet was not careless. That was what I had told myself in the beginning, that her ease with people was a kind of carelessness, a lack of discernment. But the longer I watched her, the more I had to admit to myself that she saw people clearly. She saw them perhaps more clearly than I did. She had a way of knowing what a person needed before they said it. She brought food to the Hendersons 3 days before old Mrs. Henderson finally told anyone she was ill. She knew. I do not know how she knew. She just did. I did not know how to account for that. It did not fit the picture I had of her. So I kept the picture I had of her. So I kept the picture anyway, and I disregarded what did not fit. We were not enemies. I want to be clear about that. We were friendly. We worked alongside each other many times over the years, and when it was just the two of us working, we could talk easily enough. But there was something in me that stayed back from her, something that would not give her what she seemed to offer freely to everyone, which was the simple, uncomplicated fact of being liked. I think she knew it. Harriet was perceptive enough to know it. She never said anything. She just kept being exactly who she was, which was generous toward me in a way I could not quite justify resenting and could not quite bring myself to accept. The years moved. In 1862, when I was 20 years old, I married a man named George Calloway. He was a good man, steady, not exciting in the way that some women wanted their husbands to be exciting, but solid and honest, and he worked hard and he was kind to me, which is not a thing every woman could say of her husband in those years. We built a life together on the eastern side of my father's land, which my father gave us as a wedding gift, 60 acres of it. We had 7 children. I have told you that already. Harriet married a man named Foster Webb in 1863. He was a farmer also. He had 40 acres 3 miles east, and he was known as a capable and decent man. They had 4 children, 2 boys, 2 girls. We saw each other regularly. Church, corn husking, the occasional visit when one family needed help from the other. We were neighbors, and we were something like friends, and we were something like not friends. And the years went on in that way for a long time. And then in the spring of 1869, I am 26 years old. My husband George takes sick with something that starts as a cough and becomes, over the course of 6 weeks, something far worse. The doctor comes 3 times. He charges $2 a visit. That was not a small sum. He does what he can do, which is not much. And George gets worse, and the slow, terrible way of lung sicknesses in those years. I nursed him. I did everything that could be done, and some things that probably could not have helped, but that I did anyway, because I did not know how to sit still. And during that time, Harriet came. She came every 3 days. She brought food, real food. Not the customary offering of a loaf of bread and a pot of soup that neighbors brought to signal their concern, and then retreated with. She brought roasted chicken and dried apple pies and preserved beans and things that I would not have had the time or the mind to make for myself or my children while George was sick. She sat with him so that I could sleep. She sat with him for hours at a time, and she talked to him, and she made him laugh sometimes, which I had not been able to do. I was grateful. I was. And I was also something else. I was ashamed, not of needing help. I was ashamed that it was Harriet who gave it, because it meant I had been wrong about her for 11 years, and I was not accustomed to being wrong. And I was not accustomed to owing a debt to someone I had held at a careful arm's length for the entirety of our acquaintance. George died in June of 1869. He was 31 years old. I was 26. I had 4 children living and 1 on the way, which Harriet could see, but which I had not said aloud to anyone yet. She knew without being told. She came the morning after George was buried, and she held my hands across the kitchen table, and she said simply, "Let me help you," not as a question, as a plain statement of what was going to happen. And I let her. I had no other choice. For the better part of a year, Harriet Webb was the person who kept my household from collapsing entirely. She was there in the mornings when she could be. She watched my children when I needed the time to manage the farm. She was there when my youngest daughter was born in November of 1869, which I named Alice. And she was there when Alice took sick in the February of 1870, and we did not know for 2 weeks whether she would live. Alice lived, and Harriet sat up with her 3 of those nights. I do not know how to explain what it is like to need someone that much and to not know how to accept it. I was grateful, and I was resentful of my own gratitude, and I was ashamed of the resentment, and around it went in me, day after day. That first year of being a widow, I never said any of that to Harriet. What I said was thank you. What I said was I don't know what I would have done. What I said was the polite surface of all of it, the correct words in the correct order, and underneath the words there was everything I kept. Now I have to tell you what I kept. In the autumn of 1870, my children are 1, 3, 5, 8, and 11, and I am 27 years old and widowed, and the farm is mine to manage, and I am doing it barely and exhaustedly, but doing it, and a man comes to visit. His name was Daniel Hartfield. He was from Clifton, which was about 12 miles north. He was 34 years old. He was a widower himself. 2 years passed. He had 2 children of his own. He was not a handsome man in the conventional sense, but he was interesting to look at, which is sometimes better. He had dark eyes, and he asked careful, attentive questions, and he listened to the answers with a quality of stillness that I had not encountered often in men. He came to visit because his cousin was married to the woman who ran the dry goods store in town, and the woman at the dry goods store knew my mother and my mother, without asking me or consulting me in any way, had apparently mentioned that her widowed daughter was a capable woman who managed a farm alone, and was perhaps ready to consider her options. My mother. She was trying to help, she was. I was furious. I was furious in the way that I often was furious in those years, which was completely and silently, with no outlet. But Daniel came, and I received him, and we talked for 2 hours in the front room while the children were supervised by my mother in the kitchen. And I was not furious at him. That was the surprise. He was easy to talk to. He was thoughtful. He treated me as a person who had opinions worth hearing, which was not universal in men in those years, and is not universal now either, I suspect. He came back the following week, and the week after that. Harriet saw him on his 3rd visit. She was at my house when he arrived, helping me with a piece of the roof that needed attention, and she met him at the door when I was still coming in from the back of the house. By the time I came through, she had already learned his name and his situation and had made him feel entirely welcome. She pulled me aside before she left that evening. She said, "Eleanor, he seems like a good man. I think you should give him a proper chance." I said I was giving him a chance. I said it carefully and not unkindly. She said, "No, I mean a real chance, not the kind where you are already deciding in advance." I did not answer her. She was right. I knew she was right. And I hated that she was right. And I hated that she was right. Because I had already decided. Not against Daniel. Daniel was fine. Daniel was perhaps more than fine. I had decided against the entire project of opening myself to another person, of needing someone again, the way I had needed George, of being in the position once more of having something taken from me without warning or consent. I did not want to love someone who could die, and everyone can die. So I did not want to love anyone. Daniel came for 6 more months. He was patient. He was not pressing. He was simply and quietly there, which I think he understood was what was needed, even if I never said so. And I liked him. I did. I liked him more with each visit, and the liking frightened me. And then in the spring of 1871, he asked me if I would consider marrying him, and I said no. I said it plainly and without cruelty, but also without adequate explanation. I said I did not think I was ready to marry again, and I was not sure I would ever be ready, and I thought it was better for him to know that. So he was not waiting for something that was not going to come. He received it quietly. He thanked me for my honesty. He left. He married a woman from Yellow Springs in 1872. I heard about it through the usual channels of a small county. He had 3 more children with her. He died in 1901 at the age of 65. I heard about that too. That is not the secret. I am telling you all of this so that you understand what the years were, what the landscape was, how it was that I came to be in the situation I am going to tell you about. You need to understand the woman I was at 30, at 35, at 40, the woman who had decided that she was better served by being closed than by being open. The woman who had decided that the people in her life were safest when kept at a certain distance, even the one she loved, even Harriet. In the January of 1873, I am 30 years old, and it is a cold winter, even by Ohio standards. The kind of cold where the inside walls of the house frost over and you sleep in your coat. My children are well. The farm is manageable. I have learned in the 4 years since George died how to run 60 acres with hired help in spring and summer, and without any help at all in winter. And I have learned it the hard way, which means I know it completely. Harriet comes to visit on a Saturday. Foster, her husband, has gone to Dayton on business, and the children are with his mother, and she comes alone, which she does sometimes, to sit and talk without the children underfoot. We have become, in the years since George's death, something that I would have called close, or as close as I was capable of letting anyone be. She knew things about me that no one else knew, small things, and a few that were not small. We sat by the fire. We drank tea, and she told me something. She told me that Foster had been having a correspondence with a woman in Dayton for 2 years. She had found the letters. She had read them. They were not friendly letters. They were letters of a kind that a married man should not be writing to anyone but his wife. She told me this quietly, without tears at first, just telling it plainly the way she told things. I listened. And here is the thing. Here is the thing I have carried for 70 years. I knew, not about the letters specifically, but I had known something for more than a year. I had seen Foster Webb and Xenia in December of 1871, on a day when he had told Harriet he was going to Springfield. I had seen him in Xenia. I had seen him come out of the post office with a letter in his hand, and then cross the street and meet a woman on the corner who I did not know. And they had spoken for perhaps 10 minutes with a quality of familiarity that I recognized even from a distance. I had not told Harriet. I told myself I was not certain. I told myself what I had seen could have been innocent. I told myself it was not my place. I told myself I did not want to cause pain if the cause was uncertain. But the truth I have never said out loud was this. I did not tell her because I was afraid. Not afraid of Foster, not afraid of the consequences, afraid of what telling her would mean for us. Afraid that if I told her, she would ask me how long I had known, and I would have to say more than a year, and she would know that I had kept it. She would know I had chosen my own comfort over her well-being for a year and a half, and she would see me clearly, the way she had always had the capacity to see people clearly, and she would see that I had failed her, that the woman she had sat up 3 nights with a sick infant was capable of that kind of silence. I could not stand the thought of her seeing me that way, so I said nothing. For a year and a half, while she was married to a man who was lying to her, I said nothing. And on that January Saturday in 1873, when she told me what she had found, I sat across from her and I listened and I said, "Harriet, I am so sorry." And I held her hands across the table the way she had held mine 4 years earlier, and I did not tell her what I knew. I did not tell her how long I had known it. I let her believe I was hearing it for the first time. She sat at my table and she cried, and I sat with her and I did not tell her. She worked through it. Harriet was not a woman who collapsed. She confronted Foster. He denied it at first, and then he did not deny it, and they had a long, terrible season of reckoning in that marriage that I only heard pieces of. They stayed together. They had a fifth child in 1875. I do not know if that was the right choice for her. She seemed in the years after to be all right. She seemed to have found some accommodation with it. But I never knew what she said in the dark to herself. I never knew what she thought when she was alone. And I never told her. We remained close. We remained what I would have called good friends for the next 30 years. She was at my table for Christmas in 1879 and in 1883 and in many years in between. When my daughter Ruth got married in 1886, Harriet sat in the front row and cried happy tears the way a second mother would, and I never told her. Every time I sat across from her, I held this thing in my chest like a stone. Every time she was generous with me, every time she brought something over unasked, every time she looked at me with that clear, direct look of hers that saw through most people, I felt the stone. I told myself it was too late. By 1880, it was 10 years past. By 1890, it was 20. What good would it do to tell her? Foster was still her husband. The children were grown. What would it serve to tell her now that the woman she trusted most had known and said nothing? That is what I told myself, that it was too late, that I was protecting her. I was protecting myself. Still, always. Foster Webb died in the winter of 1898. He was 61 years old. Heart trouble. Harriet was a widow at 54. I went to the funeral. I sat beside her in the church. I held her arm, and I did not tell her. In 993, Harriet fell ill. Not suddenly, the way older people fall ill, with a slow accumulation of small failures. Her daughter Margaret was with her, her son Caleb. They wrote to me when she was worse in the fall of that year. They said she was asking for me. I was 61 years old and I went to see her. I sat beside her bed and I held her hand. She was thin in the way illness makes you thin, but her eyes were still the same. Still that clear-seeing quality that had unsettled me when she was 17 years old and I was 16. She said to me, "Eleanor, I have been so glad of you." Those were her words. "I have been so glad of you." I sat with her for 3 hours. I held her hand. I talked to her about the old times, about the farm, about her children, about mine, about the corn husking of 1870 when the Henderson boy fell off the wagon and we laughed so hard neither of us could stand up straight, about all the things we had been to each other over 45 years, and I did not tell her. I left that afternoon because my children were expecting me home. I kissed her forehead. I said I would come back next week. She died 4 days later. I was not there. Her daughter sent word. She died in the night, quietly. Her daughter said, without waking anyone. She was 60 years old. 4 days. I had 4 days, and I did not tell her. I have thought about it every day since. That is not an exaggeration. I am 83 years old, and I have thought about it every single day for 31 years. Every morning when I wake, and every evening when I try to sleep. Sometimes it is the first thing, and sometimes it is the last thing, and sometimes it is both. What I did not do was simple. I saw something I should have told her. I chose not to tell her. I kept it for 32 years until the last moment where telling it might have mattered, where she might have had the chance to look at me with those clear eyes and decide what she thought of me, where she might have said, Eleanor, I forgive you, or might have said, Eleanor, I needed to know that. Either of those would have been better. Either of those would have been the truth, instead of what I gave her, which was a clean, comfortable lie of omission stretched across 32 years. I gave her my presence, and I gave her my hands, and I gave her my company, and I gave her everything except the one true thing. That is what I kept. That is the secret I have kept for 70 years. The years after she died, I changed something about myself. Not enough, never enough to undo what had been done. But I changed something. When my son James married a woman in 1908 that I thought was wrong for him, I said nothing. When I say I thought she was wrong for him, I mean I had reasons, real reasons. She was careless with money in ways I could see clearly. She was not reliably honest with small things, which is usually a sign of larger things. I had reasons. I had reasons. I said nothing. I watched it. I waited to see if I was right. I was wrong. She steadied him. She made him careful with money where he had been loose with it. She was loyal to him in the 23 years they had together before she died. She was a good mother to their children. She was good to me, the old difficult woman across the county. In all the years I was difficult. I was wrong about her exactly the way I was wrong about Harriet at the beginning. Exactly that way. So when my granddaughter Hetty, named for Harriet, told me in 1921 that she was in love with a man her father did not approve of, I said to her, Hetty, you tell me what you see in him and I will listen. She told me. I listened, not the way I used to listen, which was waiting for the thing I had already decided to be confirmed. I listened the way Harriet used to listen to people, all the way through. She married him. He has been a good husband. He has been a better man than any of us gave him credit for at the start. I think about Harriet when I look at Hetty and her husband. I think, this is the thing you gave me, Harriet. This is what I finally learned. Too late for you, not too late for her. But it does not balance. Let me tell you that plainly. The good things you learn from a mistake do not balance the mistake. That is a story people tell themselves to make the weight bearable. The mistake remains. The missed chance remains. The 4 days I had and did not use remain. If you are listening to me and you had something you are holding, something you know you should have said to someone, and have not said, I am asking you to hear me. Say it now, not tomorrow. Now, today, before the 4 days happen to you. I know what you are thinking. You are thinking it is complicated. You are thinking the time is not right. You are thinking the person might not receive it well. You are thinking of all the reasons why waiting makes more sense than not waiting. Those are not reasons. Those are excuses dressed in the clothing of reasons. I know the difference. I wore those clothes for 32 years. Pride is not protection. Waiting is not wisdom. The right moment is not coming. It has already been here 100 times. You passed it. You will pass it again unless you stop. Tell the person you were wrong. Tell them what you saw and did not say. Tell them you were afraid and that the fear won out over the love and you are sorry for it. Those are the words. They are not complicated words. They are small and plain, and they are the only ones that will do the work. And if you are thinking that it is too late, that the person is gone, that you had your chance and it passed the way mine passed, then I'm not going to tell you that you should forgive yourself easily. That would be dishonest. But I will tell you this. The carrying of it does not have to be silent. The carrying of it can be told. That is what I am doing now. I am telling it. After 70 years, I am finally telling it, even if the only person I am telling it to is a stranger. Even if Harriet cannot hear it. Maybe that is all any of us can do with the things we should have said and did not say. We say them eventually, even to the air, even to nobody. We say them. I dream about her sometimes. We are young in the dream, 16 and 17, standing in the field between our father's farms. The goldenrod is blooming. It is August. The air has that particular quality of late summer that smells like the end of something. She turns to me, and I try to tell her. I try to say, Harriet, I saw Foster and Xenia, and I should have told you. And I did not tell you because I was afraid, and I am sorry. I have always been sorry. But in the dream, I cannot speak. I open my mouth, and nothing comes out. The words are there, but they will not form. And she looks at me with those clear eyes, waiting, and I cannot say it, and the goldenrod goes on blooming, and the air goes on having that smell of the end of something, and I wake up. I wake up still holding the secret I should have given to her 45 years ago, the one secret she never knew I kept.